Imagine being buried in the searing, golden sands of the Sahara, only to wake up thousands of years later, perfectly preserved. That is not science fiction, but the accidental beginning of one of history's most elaborate obsessions. Ancient Egypt was a land defined by the Nile, a narrow ribbon of life cutting through an endless void of death. For the earliest Egyptians, death was not an end, but a terrifying, unavoidable transition. They believed the soul, or the Ka, needed a physical anchor to survive the afterlife. If the body decayed, the soul vanished into nothingness. Early on, Egyptians didn't have to work hard to preserve their dead. Around 5000 BCE, before the rise of the pharaohs, they simply buried their ancestors in shallow, oval pits dug directly into the desert sand. It was a brutal environment. The sun blazed, the sand was bone dry, and there was zero humidity. Nature performed an accidental miracle. The hot sand wickeded the moisture out of the corpses almost instantly, creating natural, leather-like mummies. This was the mummy by accident era, but as Egyptian society grew, so did their ambition. By the early dynastic period, around 3100 BCE, they began building more elaborate tombs. They moved bodies out of the pits and into stone-lined chambers called mastabas. This changed everything. By shielding the bodies from the sand, they accidentally kick-started the process of decay. Without the dehydrating power of the sun-baked earth, the bodies rotted. It was a spiritual catastrophe. The priests and elites panicked. They had to figure out how to recreate what the sand had once done automatically. Thus, the deliberate science of mummification was born. The process took exactly 70 days. It wasn't just a physical job, it was a high-stakes religious ritual. The first step was the most grisly, the brain. Using a long metal hook inserted through the nostril, the embalmers would reach into the skull, break the ethmoid bone, and scramble the brain matter until it liquefied. They then tilted the head to let it drain out. They didn't consider the brain important. To them, the heart was the seat of intelligence and emotion, the organ that would be weighed against the feather of truth in the Hall of Ma'at. Next, the body was prepared for the most critical phase, evisceration. A skilled cutter would make a small incision on the left side of the torso. Through this opening, they carefully removed the stomach, intestines, liver, and lungs. These were washed, dried, and placed into 4 distinct containers called canopic jars, each guarded by one of the 4 sons of the god Horus. The heart, however, remained. It was left inside the chest. It was the vital spark, the anchor of the person's identity. Now, the drying process began. This was the true genius of the Egyptian method. They used a naturally occurring salt called natron. Found in the dried-up lake beds of the Wadi Natron, natron is a mix of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate. It acts as a powerful desiccant. It pulls every drop of water out of the flesh. The embalmers packed the body with bags of natron and covered the exterior completely. They left the body to sit in this mineral bath for 40 days. When they unwrapped the body, it was shriveled, dark, and hard. It was effectively mummified. But the Egyptians were perfectionists. They wanted the body to look human again, not like a piece of dried leather. To restore a lifelike shape, they packed the empty body cavity with linen, sawdust, and even lichen. They rubbed the skin with precious oils, resins, and beeswax to make it supple and fragrant. They painted the skin ochre for men, yellow for women, and applied makeup to the eyelids. They stuffed the nose and mouth to keep the facial structure firm. Finally, they began the wrapping. This was a marathon of precision. Priests wound hundreds of yards of fine linen around the limbs and torso, starting with the fingers and toes. Between every layer, they smeared a sticky, fragrant resin that acted as a waterproof glue. Tucked into these bandages were intricate amulets, the Ankh for life, the Jed pillar for stability, and the heart scarab to protect the soul from testifying against itself in the afterlife. A mask, usually made of cartonnage or gold for the wealthy, was placed over the head. This served as a backup face, a final map for the soul to recognize its own body. But why go to such insane, expensive, and laborious length? It wasn't just about vanity. It was a desperate defense against the oblivion of death. By 1500 BCE, during the New Kingdom, this technology had reached its peak. It wasn't cheap. The best mummification cost a small fortune in silver, spices, and linen, accessible only to the pharaohs and the top tier of the bureaucracy. But even the poor found ways to preserve their loved ones. using cheaper resins and simpler salts. They weren't just preserving a corpse. They were building an engine for eternity. Think about the sheer scale of the gamble. They were investing the wealth of a lifetime into a 60-minute ceremony of rapping and chanting, hoping that if they got the chemistry right and the spells perfect, they could cheat time itself. The mummies were meant to be permanent, yet most were looted within a few centuries. Their tombs were breached, their gold stolen, and their bodies scattered. Many of the pharaohs we study today spent thousands of years in dark, quiet corners, only to be dragged into modern museums to be scanned by CT machines and analyzed by DNA sequencers. The irony is profound. The Egyptians tried to stop time, to lock their physical existence in a permanent loop of preservation. Instead, they became the ultimate testament to the passage of time. They failed to save their physical bodies from history, but they succeeded in something else. They forced the modern world to look at them, remember them, and grapple with their obsession. We are still talking about them 4,000 years later. Perhaps that, and not the natron or the linen, is the true secret to immortality. If you could ensure your memory lived for 5,000 years, would you trade your physical body to get there? Or are we, in our own digital age, already trying to build a new kind of mummy, leaving behind our data and our stories in the hopes that we too can outrun the silence of the void?